Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the 9th movie from acclaimed director Quentin Tarantino, and stars pretty much anyone you can really think of at this point. There's a lot of people in this movie. And when it comes to Quentin Tarantino, if you've seen most of my reviews in the past, you will know that I am a pretty big fan of his movies. Inglourious Basterds is one of my favourite movies of all time, and his back catalogue is pretty strong. I mean, it's not flawless. I mean, you have things like Death Proof, which kind of screw that up. But for the most part, his back catalogue of movies is very strong, whether it be Kill Bill, Jackie Brown, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. The list is endless, and the guy definitely knows what he's doing. And with this 9th movie, I genuinely didn't know what to expect, because I'd heard some things regarding this film that initially I didn't quite know what to think about, because I was like, okay, this is his 9th film, maybe he's going to do something a little different with his 9th movie. Because I will admit, his last few movies, though tonally and stylistically have been a slightly different from each other, have kind of all felt the same. This one, on the other hand, is slightly refreshing, because it's mostly people talking. And I know that's nothing new for a Tarantino film, because one of the key aspects of any of his films is his dialogue. But with this movie, the majority of the film is just a load of conversations. And that iconic Tarantino violence doesn't really kick in until the last 20 minutes, which I thought was kind of refreshing to see. The writing and performances are as great as usual when it comes to Tarantino movies. However, the two standouts here are Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio as kind of the two main characters of the movie. I mean, you could argue with a film like this, seeing that there are so many characters, there isn't really a main character. But here, these two definitely steal the show, as one, they have the most screen time, and two, I mean, they pretty much make up the whole film, really, but they definitely do work well. Their chemistry is really good, and you feel like these are two people that have worked together for quite some time now, and that friendship does feel very real to a certain extent. Also, Margot Robbie is very good as Sharon Tate. She doesn't really get much to do, but that being said, whenever her character appears on screen, it is important in the long run, I suppose, especially if you're aware of how historical events were supposed to happen. And yeah, I suppose in that sense, her character is kind of important, but as you're watching the movie, it's kind of like, is there really any point to her character? Because she really isn't contributing much to the overall plot. And that's one thing I have to say about this movie that is both a positive, but also comes with a few hindrances as well. The last few Tarantino movies that he's made all have like an end goal. You know, there's a certain point that needs to be reached by the end of the movie, and that's what gives the driving force and the flow of the movie to just keep going till you get to a certain point. My best examples are probably Django Unchained and Inglourious Basterds. All have a specific end goal by the end of the movie, and they just keep pushing till they get to that point. Whereas this movie just kind of flows from each scene without much story structure or much to link the two in the first place. It just kind of randomly flows from each scene to the next, giving it a very Pulp Fiction-y vibe. But that being said, because it does this, it does make a few scenes feel a bit meandery, a little bit, which is a bit of a shame. Because with Pulp Fiction, even though you have all these different storylines going on all at once, there is still a structure there that keeps like a through line going on. So like you may have all these different things going on, but there is something that still connects all of them together. Whereas this one just feels like a load of random scenes happening one after another that do manage to connect by the end. But as you're watching it, that through line isn't very visible, therefore making a lot of the scenes feel like they're just going nowhere or meandering to the point where it's like, was there really any point to that scene? And then the next scene happens and it's just kind of the same thing. And unfortunately, I did get that a few times in the movie, which is why it kind of hindered my overall viewing experience of the film. Also, like I said, compared to anything else that Tarantino's made, this movie is surprisingly light on the violence. The violence really doesn't kick in until the last 20 minutes, and the finale is probably one of my favourite aspects of this entire movie. Not just because it's a load of build-up to this incredibly brutal moment that happens, but also because, and I'm trying to say this as best as I can without getting into spoilers, but the ending manages to do a more subtle version of what Inglourious Basterds did with its ending. Because if you've seen Inglourious Basterds, they kind of managed to take what actually happened in history and just kind of switch it on its head and go in a completely different direction that actually didn't happen. And this movie does something a little bit similar as well. But you will only acknowledge it and appreciate that if you actually know the events that were supposed to happen. And I feel like not everyone going into this movie knows what happened in real life. Which might be a detriment, but to me, because I actually am aware of the events that should have happened, I thought it was a nice little touch and works quite well here. Not as well as Inglourious Basterds, because that ending is just so batshit fucking insane. But here, I thought it worked pretty well as well. The last thing I want to point out with this movie is the editing. Now, usually with a Tarantino movie, the editing is one of the best aspects of it. It's usually tight, concise, and it only cuts when it needs to. Again, Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Basterds have some of the best editing out of any of his movies, because the editing at times can be kind of sparse, but also really quick and tight. This movie, I have no idea what the fuck happened, but there are some scenes in particular that are so choppily edited that it kind of baffles me. Like, there are some... most of the editing in the movie is fine, but there are some scenes in particular that are just so badly edited and just so choppily edited all over the place that it kind of feels like when a film student makes a short film for the first time. You film all this lovely, gorgeous looking footage and you don't want any of it to go to waste. So, to use it all, you just kind of awkwardly cut it into scenes that don't need it, therefore making a scene last longer than it should, and also just having these scenes with really random cuts in it, with random footage that doesn't need to be there. Most film directors nowadays realise that if a shot is nice but doesn't, add anything to the scene or the story, then get rid of it. But unfortunately, there are some scenes in this movie that feel like a film student's first short film. And trust me, I know this from experience because I've done it quite a few times in the past, where I've shot a lot of lovely footage, but unfortunately, I can't use that footage. But I want to, because I've shot it, so I want to use it. So I just shove it in regardless. And there are a couple of scenes in this movie that do feel a bit like that, which is a real shame because, like I said, the editing is usually one of the best aspects of a Tarantino film, and here it's a bit all over the place. In the end, though, I still did enjoy Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is why I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I don't think I can go any higher because of the problems I have with it. But at this point in time, I'm happy sitting around an 8 or a 7.5. Yeah, definitely not one of Tarantino's best movies, but it's still an enjoyable time. So guys, that was my review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.